I walked into that country club thinking I was about to make lifelong friendships with successful women who shared my values. Instead, I found myself publicly humiliated, verbally torn apart, and escorted out like common trash. But these privileged ladies had no idea they had just declared war on someone whose husband controlled their entire world. Stay tuned, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma, and I want to share with you the most transformative day of my entire life. I've always been what people might call an ordinary woman with extraordinary dreams. I grew up in a tiny farming community called Riverside Falls, where the population barely reached 2,000 souls, and everyone knew your business before you did. Life there moved at the pace of corn growing and seasons changing, which suited me perfectly. 4 years ago, I married Daniel, a man who possessed the rarest combination of intelligence, kindness, and humility I'd ever encountered. We met at the local library during a thunderstorm when I was researching lesson plans for my kindergarten class, and he was absorbed in a thick book about global economics. When the power went out, we spent 3 hours talking by candlelight about everything from childhood dreams to favorite books. Daniel mentioned he worked in finance and did some consulting for various companies, which sounded impressive but not particularly exciting to a small-town teacher like me. Our life together was beautifully simple. We lived in a charming 2-story house with a wraparound porch, where we'd drink coffee every morning, while watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Daniel worked from his home office most days, occasionally traveling for business meetings that he never discussed in detail. I assumed he was being considerate, not wanting to bore me with corporate jargon and spreadsheet talk. Our conversations centered around my students, progress, weekend farmers market trips, and plans for the vegetable garden we were cultivating together. What I didn't realize was that Daniel was protecting me from a world I couldn't have imagined. He wanted our relationship to exist in a bubble of authenticity, where love mattered more than bank accounts and character-trumped connections. Looking back, I understand why he made that choice, but at the time, I simply trusted him completely and never questioned why certain topics seemed off-limits. Money was never a concern in our household, though we lived modestly by choice. Daniel insisted on paying off my student loans immediately after we married, which I thought was incredibly generous for someone in middle management. We drove reliable but unremarkable cars, shopped at regular grocery stores, and our biggest splurges were occasional dinners at the Italian restaurant one town over. I felt grateful for our comfortable life, and never wondered how Daniel afforded such generosity on what I assumed was a decent but ordinary salary. Everything changed one crisp autumn morning when Daniel approached me in our kitchen, his usual calm demeanor replaced by nervous energy that immediately caught my attention. He was fidgeting with his coffee mug, a telltale sign that something significant was weighing on his mind. I was preparing lunches for my students, field trip to the pumpkin patch, humming softly while cutting sandwiches into fun shapes. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar tension that made me look up from my sandwich assembly line. "I have something important to ask you, and I want you to know you can absolutely say no without any pressure whatsoever." My heart started beating faster because Daniel rarely sounded so serious unless something was genuinely important. I set down the cookie cutter I was using and gave him my full attention, noticing how he kept running his fingers through his dark hair, another nervous habit I'd learned to recognize. "Some colleagues' wives have extended an invitation for you to join them for lunch this Saturday at the Grandview Country Club," he continued, watching my face carefully for any reaction. "They've heard wonderful things about you and expressed genuine interest in meeting the woman who's made me so happy." The Grandview Country Club. Even in our small community, everyone knew about that exclusive establishment. It was the kind of place where state politicians held fundraisers, and business deals worth millions were discussed over 18 holes of golf. I'd driven past its imposing iron gates countless times, but never imagined I'd have reason to step foot inside. "Really? They want to meet me?" I asked, excitement bubbling up inside me like champagne. The prospect of meeting successful women who might become genuine friends was thrilling beyond words. "Yes, they specifically requested to meet you," Daniel confirmed, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation. "I think it could be good for you to connect with other women who might share some of your interests and values." I practically danced around the kitchen with joy. Living in Riverside Falls, my social circle consisted mainly of fellow teachers and a few neighbors. All wonderful people, but none particularly adventurous or worldly. The idea of befriending sophisticated women who traveled extensively and engaged with fascinating careers made me feel like I was about to embark on an exciting new chapter of my life. "What are their names?" I asked, already mentally cataloging my wardrobe for something appropriate to wear to such a prestigious venue. "Victoria, Anastasia, Penelope, Cordelia, and Evangeline," Daniel replied, and I could hear the careful way he pronounced each name, as if they carried weight and significance I couldn't yet understand. "They're all accomplished women in their own right, and I believe you'll find them intellectually stimulating company." The rest of that week flew by in a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. I must have tried on every dress in my closet at least 3 times, seeking the perfect balance between respectful and confident. Finally, I settled on a navy blue dress with delicate lace detailing that my mother had given me for my college graduation. It was elegant without being flashy, sophisticated without being intimidating, and it made me feel like the best version of myself. I paired the dress with my great-grandmother's cameo brooch, a family heirloom that always made me feel connected to generations of strong women who came before me. My shoes were simple black heels that were comfortable enough for walking but dressy enough for the occasion. I practiced walking in them around the house, wanting to project confidence and grace when I met these impressive women. Daniel seemed increasingly thoughtful as Saturday approached, asking multiple times if I was certain I wanted to go through with this lunch. His concern touched me deeply, but I couldn't understand why he seemed worried about what should be a delightful social opportunity. "Of course I want to go," I assured him Friday evening as we sat on our porch swing, watching fireflies dance across our garden. "Why wouldn't I be excited about making new friends? You've always encouraged me to expand my horizons and challenge myself." He pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head with unusual intensity. "Just remember, Emma, you are extraordinary exactly as you are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. No matter what they say or how they behave, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion." His words seemed oddly specific, almost like a warning, but I attributed his concern to natural protectiveness. After all, he was sending his small-town wife into a world he knew better than I did, and he wanted to make sure I felt confident and prepared. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, with golden sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows like a blessing on the day ahead. I woke up with butterflies performing acrobatics in my stomach, a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded me of my first day teaching kindergarten. I could barely manage a few bites of the blueberry pancakes Daniel made specially for me, my appetite completely overshadowed by anticipation. The drive to Grandview Country Club took 45 minutes through winding country roads lined with ancient oak trees displaying their autumn colors in magnificent splendor. As we approached the club, my breath caught in my throat at the sheer grandeur of the place. Manicured lawns stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted with perfectly placed flower beds and elegant water features that looked like they belonged in a palace garden. The main building was a masterpiece of colonial architecture, with towering white columns and sweeping staircases that spoke of old money and established traditions. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway like a showcase of automotive excellence, and I suddenly felt grateful for Daniel's insistence that we take his newer sedan rather than my practical but aging hatchback. "Are you sure I belong here?" I whispered to Daniel as we pulled up to the valet station, suddenly overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding us. "You belong anywhere you choose to be," he replied firmly, taking my hand and squeezing it reassuringly. "Remember what I told you about your worth. Don't let anyone make you forget who you are." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside the country club, I felt like I'd stepped into a movie set designed to showcase wealth and refinement. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing rainbows across cream-colored walls, adorned with oil paintings of fox hunts and equestrian scenes. Persian rugs covered polished marble floors, and fresh flower arrangements the size of small trees graced every available surface. The air itself seemed different here, perfumed with luxury and privilege. The hostess, a woman whose age was impossible to determine thanks to what I suspected was excellent plastic surgery, examined me with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating social status at a glance. Her smile was professionally pleasant but didn't quite reach her eyes as she confirmed my lunch reservation. "You must be here for Victoria Ashworth's gathering," she said, her voice carrying the kind of refined accent that suggested years of expensive education. "Right this way, please." The ladies are already seated in the Magnolia Room. As we walked through the dining areas, I noticed other patrons glancing in my direction with what seemed like curiosity mixed with assessment. I tried to ignore their stares and focus on maintaining the confident posture my mother had drilled into me during childhood etiquette lessons that I never thought I'd need. The Magnolia Room was everything I'd imagined an exclusive private dining space would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the 18th green, where golfers in pristine white outfits moved across emerald grass-like figures in an impressionist painting. The table was set with more silverware than I'd ever seen in one place, and the china looked too delicate to actually eat from. Then I saw them, and my confidence evaporated like morning mist under the summer sun. 5 women sat around an oval mahogany table, each one looking like she'd stepped off the cover of a high-fashion magazine. They were breathtakingly beautiful, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of effortless sophistication that money could buy but couldn't teach. Victoria, whom I recognized as the apparent leader of the group, wore a tailored emerald green suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her platinum blonde hair was arranged in a chignon so perfect it looked sculpted, and her jewelry caught the light with every subtle movement. Anastasia was draped in champagne-colored silk that seemed to flow around her like liquid luxury, while Penelope's black ensemble was so elegantly cut it looked like wearable art. Cordelia had chosen a dusty rose creation that complemented her auburn hair perfectly, and Evangeline looked ethereal in powder blue that matched her eyes exactly. Each woman wore makeup applied with professional precision, and their collective presence created an intimidating wall of polished perfection that made me feel like a dandelion in a rose garden. "You must be Emma," Victoria said, rising gracefully and extending a manicured hand that felt cool and smooth against my slightly trembling fingers. "I'm Victoria Ashworth. We've heard such interesting things about you." The way she said interesting made my stomach tighten, with the first hint that this lunch might not unfold as I'd hoped. The other women introduced themselves with smiles that seemed more performative than genuine, their voices carrying undertones I couldn't quite interpret but that made me increasingly uncomfortable. I took my seat in the empty chair they'd left for me, immediately noticing how my navy dress, which had seemed so elegant at home, now looked hopelessly simple compared to their designer ensembles. My great-grandmother's cameo, which usually made me feel connected to family history, suddenly felt like a child's costume jewelry in the presence of their obviously expensive accessories. "So tell us about yourself, Emma," Anastasia said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that somehow felt more dangerous than outright hostility. "We're absolutely dying to hear about your little life in—" She paused as if searching for the words. Where was it again? Riverside Falls? The way she said my hometown's name made it sound quaint, insignificant, like a place that existed solely for the amusement of more sophisticated people. I felt heat rising in my cheeks but tried to respond with dignity and pride in my roots. "I teach kindergarten at Riverside Falls Elementary," I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I've been there for 6 years now, and I absolutely love working with children. There's something magical about helping 5-year-olds discover the joy of reading and learning." The women exchanged glances that were impossible to miss, loaded with meaning I didn't want to interpret. Penelope's laugh tinkled like expensive wind chimes, but there was nothing musical about the sound to my ears. "How wonderfully pedestrian," she said, and I knew immediately that she didn't mean it as a compliment. "And you met Daniel where?" "At some charming local establishment, I suppose." "We met at the library during a thunderstorm," I replied, refusing to be ashamed of our romantic story even as these women seemed determined to diminish it. We talked for hours about books and dreams and discovered we had so much in common. "A library," Cordelia repeated, as if I'd said we met at a garbage dump. How utterly quaint. I suppose that's the social hub in a place like Riverside Falls. Their questions continued, each one designed to highlight the differences between their world and mine. They asked about my education with barely concealed condescension, my family background with obvious judgment, and my hobbies with thinly veiled amusement. With every answer I gave, I could see them mentally categorizing me as inferior, unworthy, and out of place. The worst part was how they managed to make their cruelty sound almost like kindness, wrapping their insults in soft voices and gentle smiles that made me question whether I was being overly sensitive or if they were really as mean as they seemed. "What a lovely dress," Victoria said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe with the precision of a quality control inspector. Where did you find it? Some delightful boutique in your hometown? I felt my face burning as I admitted I'd bought it at a department store chain, the kind with locations in every shopping mall across America. Their collective silence spoke volumes, and I watched Evangeline literally bite her lip to suppress what I was certain would have been cruel laughter. Well, Anastasia said finally, it's certainly practical. I suppose not everyone has access to proper fashion consultants. The conversation that followed felt more like an interrogation than friendly getting-to-know-you chatter. They dissected every aspect of my life with surgical precision, from my modest wedding ceremony in our town's century-old church to my honeymoon camping trip in the national parks. Each detail I shared seemed to amuse them more than the last, as if my entire existence was some quaint anthropological study. You know, Emma, Penelope said, delicately cutting her grilled salmon into perfect bite-sized pieces. We were all quite surprised when Daniel mentioned he'd gotten married. We'd always assumed he was far too sophisticated for domestic commitment. The way she said sophisticated made it clear she believed I was anything but. I felt my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my water glass, trying to maintain some semblance of composure while these women systematically dismantled my confidence. Why would you be surprised? I asked, genuinely confused. Daniel is wonderful. Any woman would be lucky to marry him. Cordelia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose dramatically. Oh, sweetie, you really don't understand, do you? In our circles, marriage is about strategic partnerships, compatibility of backgrounds, social standing, the ability to navigate complex professional relationships. It's not just about feelings. The word feelings dripped from her lips like something distasteful she was trying not to swallow. I stared at her, struggling to comprehend how anyone could speak about love and marriage with such calculated coldness. But Daniel loves me, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. And I love him. Isn't that what matters most? The laughter that erupted from all 5 women felt like physical blows. It wasn't the warm, inclusive laughter of friendship, but the sharp, exclusionary kind, designed to make someone feel small and foolish. Love, Evangeline said, shaking her head as if I'd just declared my belief in fairy tales. How absolutely precious. Emma, darling, you clearly have no idea what Daniel's world actually requires of a wife. Victoria leaned forward, her green eyes glittering with something that looked like predatory satisfaction. Quote, let me paint you a picture, sweetheart. Daniel moves in circles where billions of dollars change hands over dinner conversations, where a single poorly chosen word can destroy decades of carefully built relationships, where your wife's behavior reflects directly on your professional credibility. Are you saying I'm not good enough for my own husband? I asked, my voice cracking with the effort of holding back tears. We're saying you're a liability, Anastasia stated with brutal directness. Every time Daniel has to introduce you to someone important, he's probably cringing internally. Every social event you attend together damages his reputation a little more. Penelope nodded sympathetically, but her eyes remained cold. It's not entirely your fault, of course. You can't help where you came from or what you don't know, but surely you can see how your background creates problems for someone in Daniel's position. The room felt like it was spinning around me. These women were systematically destroying every good feeling I'd ever had about myself, every moment of happiness in my marriage, every dream I'd harbored about fitting into Daniel's world. Look at yourself, Emma, Cordelia said, her voice taking on an almost motherly tone that was somehow more devastating than outright cruelty. Look at us. Do you honestly believe you belong in the same room? That you could hold your own in conversations about international finance or global politics? That you could represent Daniel appropriately at the kinds of events he needs to attend? I did look at them, then at my reflection in the ornate mirror across the room. They were right. I looked exactly like what I was, a small-town kindergarten teacher who'd stumbled into a world far beyond her understanding or capabilities. My dress was ordinary, my jewelry was sentimental rather than valuable, and my education was practical rather than prestigious. We're not trying to be cruel, Evangeline said softly, reaching across the table to pat my hand with fingers that felt ice-cold against my skin. We're trying to help you understand reality before you cause irreparable damage to Daniel's career and reputation. What are you suggesting I do? I asked, Though I dreaded hearing their answer, Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. The kindest thing you could do for Daniel would be to step aside gracefully. Let him find someone more suitable to his needs and position, someone who can be an asset rather than a burden. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt something breaking inside my chest, a crushing weight that made it difficult to breathe. Everything they were saying echoed fears I'd buried deep in my subconscious, doubts I'd refused to acknowledge about my worthiness and place in Daniel's life. "Perhaps it would be best if you left now," Penelope suggested gently, though her eyes remained merciless. "This has clearly been overwhelming for you, and frankly, you're beginning to make a scene." I looked around frantically, suddenly aware that other diners were indeed staring in our direction. Some looked sympathetic, others merely curious, but all were witnessing my public humiliation. The sophisticated ambiance of the country club felt suffocating, pressing down on me with the weight of my inadequacy. "Yes," Anastasia agreed, "it would be more comfortable for everyone if you made a quiet exit. No need to prolong this awkwardness." I stood on shaking legs, my vision blurred with unshed tears that I refused to let fall in front of these women. "I'm sorry I wasn't what you expected," I managed to whisper. "We're sorry too," Cordelia replied, though she didn't sound sorry at all. "But it's better that you know the truth now, rather than living in delusion indefinitely." As I walked out of that dining room, I felt the eyes of every person in the country club following me. The hostess who'd seated me earlier now looked at me with obvious pity, and the valet who'd parked our car seemed to move extra quickly, as if eager to get the embarrassment off the premises as soon as possible. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and self-recrimination. I kept hearing their voices, their certainty that I was wrong for Daniel, their conviction that I was holding back the man I loved more than my own life. By the time I reached our house, I was completely shattered, questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my worth as a human being. I sat in our driveway for nearly an hour, unable to face going inside and pretending everything was fine. Part of me wanted to pack my bags and disappear, to spare Daniel the embarrassment of being married to someone so clearly beneath his station. Another part of me was furious, not just at those women, but at Daniel for sending me into that situation unprepared. When I finally gathered the courage to enter our home, I found Daniel in his office, working intently at his computer. The moment he saw my face, he was on his feet, his expression shifting from concern to alarm to barely controlled rage as I told him everything that had happened. "They said I was a liability," I sobbed against his chest, "that I was damaging your reputation and holding back your career, that the kindest thing I could do would be to leave you." Daniel's arms tightened around me, and I could feel the tension radiating through his entire body. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet in a way I'd never heard before. "Those women," he said carefully, "have just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Maybe they're right, Daniel. Maybe I really don't belong in your world." He pulled back and gripped my shoulders, his eyes blazing with an intensity that took my breath away. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are kind, intelligent, genuine, and worth more than all of those women combined. But they knew things about your work that I don't. They understood your world in ways I never could." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him making some kind of internal decision. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." My heart started racing. "What is it?" "I haven't been completely honest about my work," he said, running his hands through his hair. "I told you I worked in finance, and that's true. But I didn't tell you that I own the company. Actually, I own several companies." I stared at him, not comprehending. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not just Daniel who works in finance. I'm Daniel Richardson, CEO and founder of Richardson Global Industries." The name hit me like lightning. Even in our small town, Richardson Global Industries was legendary, a multinational corporation that employed hundreds of thousands of people worldwide and was worth billions of dollars. "But that would make you—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "One of the wealthiest men in the country," he confirmed quietly. "Yes." The room seemed to tilt around me. "But our house, our life, the way we live." "I wanted us to have a real relationship," he explained. "I grew up surrounded by people who only cared about my money. When I met you, you loved me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted to protect that, to keep our love pure and genuine." As the shock wore off, Understanding began to dawn. Those women's husbands all work for me in various capacities, Daniel said, his voice growing colder. Victoria's husband runs the East Coast Division. Anastasia's husband heads our legal department. Penelope's husband manages our real estate acquisitions. Cordelia's husband oversees our international operations. And Evangeline's husband is our chief technology officer. I felt like I was living in some surreal dream. They work for you? They work for me. And they have no idea that their wives just spent the afternoon systematically destroying the woman I love more than life itself. Daniel walked to his desk and picked up his phone. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. And I'm hosting a dinner party tomorrow night. All 5 couples will be attending. Daniel, I don't want to see them again. You won't have to say a word, he promised. But you will be there as my wife, wearing the most beautiful dress money can buy, and they will learn exactly who they chose to attack today. Over the next 24 hours, I watched my gentle, humble husband transform into someone I barely recognized. He made phone calls with an authority that left no room for argument, arranged for personal shoppers to bring me a selection of designer gowns, and hired a team of stylists to ensure I looked every inch the billionaire's wife I actually was. The dress he chose for me was breathtaking, a deep sapphire blue that brought out my eyes, made from silk so fine it felt like wearing liquid luxury. The jewelry that accompanied it was worth more than most people's houses, including a necklace that had belonged to his grandmother, a woman whose portrait I'd admired in our hallway without knowing her significance. When our guests arrived the following evening, I barely recognized the confident woman staring back at me from our bedroom mirror. I looked sophisticated, elegant, and powerful, everything those women had implied I could never be. I thought it was time we all got to know each other better. The husbands all looked nervous, clearly sensing that something significant was happening, but unsure what. The wives looked confused and increasingly uncomfortable as they recognized artwork and furnishings that spoke of wealth beyond their imaginations. You see, Daniel continued, yesterday my wife had lunch with your wives. She came home telling me all about her wonderful afternoon, how welcoming and kind you all were. His voice carried such heavy sarcasm that no one could miss his meaning. Victoria had gone completely pale, and I could see understanding dawning in her eyes. But then she told me some other things. Things that made me very, very angry. She told me how you insulted her education, her background, her clothes. How you told her she was a liability to my career. How you suggested she should leave me for my own good. The silence in the room was deafening. Anastasia was openly crying, and Penelope looked like she might faint. What you failed to understand, Daniel continued, standing and walking around the table, is that Emma is the best thing that has ever happened to me. She has more integrity, kindness, and genuine worth than all of you combined. He stopped behind Victoria's chair. Mrs. Ashworth, your husband's division will be dissolved effective immediately. Mr. Ashworth, you're terminated. Sir. Please. Mr. Ashworth stammered. If my wife said something inappropriate. Your wife, Daniel said coldly, told my wife she was an embarrassment, that she should disappear for my own good, that she didn't belong in our world. He moved to the next couple. Mrs. Petrov, you told my wife that love doesn't matter in marriage, that strategic partnerships are more important than genuine feelings. Mr. Petrov, you're fired. One by one, he went around the table, recounting each woman's cruelty and delivering swift, final justice to their husbands. The men begged, the women sobbed, but Daniel was implacable. Here's what you all failed to understand, he said, returning to his seat and taking my hand. This isn't your world. It's mine. I built it, I control it, and I decide who belongs in it. And the woman you attacked yesterday? She's not just welcome in my world, she is my world. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within a week, all 5 men had been blacklisted from their industry, their reputations destroyed by word of Daniel's displeasure. 3 of the marriages didn't survive the financial and social devastation that followed. The women who had been so certain of their superiority found themselves outcasts in the very social circles they'd once dominated. As for me, I discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Daniel and I moved to a magnificent estate that reflected his true status, and I threw myself into philanthropic work that allowed me to make a real difference in the world. I started a foundation supporting rural education, ensuring that children from small towns like mine would have access to opportunities I'd only dreamed of. The shy kindergarten teacher those women had dismissed as worthless became a powerful advocate for social justice and educational equity. I learned to move confidently in Daniel's business world, not by changing who I was, but by recognizing that my values and perspective were assets, not liabilities. Sometimes I think about that terrible lunch, about how small and worthless those women made me feel, but I also remember the strength that emerged from that darkness. The way love triumphed over cruelty, and the proof that sometimes the quietest people wield the greatest power. They thought they were dismissing a simple woman who didn't belong in their sophisticated world. What they actually did was awaken a force they never saw coming, the protective fury of a man who had the power to change their lives forever and who loved me enough to use it. Their cruelty revealed their own emptiness, while their victims discovered reserves of strength and worth they never knew existed. In trying to diminish me, they ultimately proved that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in love, loyalty, and the courage to stand up for what matters most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.